Poor Adam and Eve, the very first humans, the ones who threw us all under the bus and just created mayhem throughout the earth. They got punked by God. But it does beg the question, if Eve would sacrifice the entire human race for a piece of fruit, what would she do for a Klondike bar? Hi, I'm Laurentia. If you haven't been here before, just know that I was in the church for longer than you've been alive, I bet, before I finally got out. If you would please like and subscribe, that helps me so much. Thank you. Today we're going to talk about Adam and Eve and why I think they were punked by God. Now understand, I don't think this story is real. Even when I was a Christian, by the time I was 18 or 19, I kind of didn't think that it was real. I considered it an allegory. And as I got older and became a Methodist, I was sure that it was an allegory. So I'm never arguing that it's real. But I want you to hear me out. If the story was real and you're a Christian, I want to show you how I think it's God's fault, all of it, not Adam and Eve. But I want you to stay to the end because I want to tell you why I think Adam was a bit of a piece of work. Okay, the first problem I have with this story is that Christians are taught, and I was taught, that Adam and Eve are the ones that fell, that disobeyed God and let evil into the world. They're responsible for all the death, destruction, the violence, everything that's happened in the last 6,000 years since the Bible thinks or says that that's when we were created. They're responsible. But I argue that God is the one that let evil in. God is the one that created the snake. And no, nowhere in the Bible, there isn't one verse that says that that serpent was Satan. There's a couple of verses in Revelation that call the Satan the serpent of old, but it doesn't say the serpent that was in the garden. I take it as how we call people snakes today, underhanded, crafty, yucky, slimy. Nowhere does it say that. So I will argue that no, it was just a snake that God created, that he allowed it to talk. He allowed it to tempt Adam and Eve. He is the one that let evil into the garden. He is responsible for the evil, not Adam and Eve. And then he curses the poor snake that he created, that he will have to walk or slither on his belly for the rest of his life. So God is responsible. He's the one that let the evil in. How were Adam and Eve supposed to understand the consequences that their action would have? They had no knowledge of good and evil, of knowledge of the world. They lived in a perfect world that God created. He created perfection for them. He provided for them. They had no consequences for any of their actions. So how could they have ever learned what would happen to them? They were led around. So in today's world, we don't consider somebody truly responsible for their actions until they're 18 years of age or older. If a person commits a crime and they're 14, 15, 16, even a murder, we will mostly charge them as children because we understand that they haven't lived long enough to understand the consequences of their actions. So there's no way that Adam and Eve could know the consequences of their actions. And God created us. He should know that we didn't. Without having real world experience, we have no idea what the consequences are. Which leads into my next point. Christians, when you ask them, well, why did God give people the ability to do this, to sin, to disobey him? And they will say, well, he doesn't want robots. He wants people that will actually love him. But I will argue, yes, he did want robots. He created us with free will. When we express our free will, what does he do? He causes untold damage, destruction, death, and every kind of misery that only the most diabolical mind could make up. So he says, so Christians will say he doesn't want robots. Of course, he wanted robots. He wanted us to obey him without question, without experience, without understanding good and evil. Who is the dumb one? Was it Adam and Eve, or was it God? And that leads me to my next point. God knew what would happen. He knows the future. He knows what's going to happen to the end of time, and he did it anyway. He did it with the full knowledge of what would happen. And I've heard Christians say, well, he needed this to all happen so that he could bring Jesus Christ into fruition. That was the ultimate plan, was Jesus Christ. Then why did he allow 4,000 years to pass? That's according to young earth creationists, with having Noah drowning an entire earth, all the children, all the babies, all the innocent animals, destroying everything he created, leaving a tiny handful of people around to repopulate the earth and become evil all over again before he sends Jesus. Why didn't he just send Jesus? What was with Noah's ark? So if any of you will give me an idea of whether you're an atheist or a Christian, tell me why that is. I would be curious to know, because it just seems like if God's whole plan was to bring Jesus around, he should have just done it at the time of Noah and forget all that other stuff. So that brings me to my last point about Adam. Let's talk about Adam for a minute. He was a piece of work. He was not a very good husband. The Genesis 3:6 seems to indicate that Adam and Eve were there together when the snake was talking specifically to Eve about the fruit. Adam seemed to be silently standing there because it says they were together. So Eve decides, oh yeah, I'm going to take a piece of this fruit. Yeah, I want to do this. And Adam is just standing there. And is he thinking, yeah, let's let her do it. Let's see if she kicks the bucket, right? Because he doesn't say anything. He doesn't reason with her. He doesn't say no. He's just standing there quietly. So Eve takes the fruit, takes a bite. Delicious. She says, have a piece. And he's like, okay, she didn't kick the bucket. She's looking good. He eats the fruit. When God comes down and asks Adam about what's going on, what is the first thing that Adam does? He blames Eve and indirectly tries to blame God to weasel out of this situation. He says, she's the one who you gave to me. You're the one, God. She gave it to me. Well, God, in this case, good for him. He wasn't having any of that. He cursed them both. And then he curses the poor snake who was only doing God's bidding. It was God's will, the whole plan. Obviously, nothing happens outside of God's will. So this poor snake, who was not Satan, he is cursed with slithering around on his belly and not being able to talk, and obviously losing most of his brains, because snakes are not very smart. So the whole thing, boy, Adam just caused mayhem, didn't he? If he would only have spoken up and said, no, Eve, let's not do this. I'm not doing it. The snake, the whole population of the snake might have been saved, and the whole world would be, I guess we'd be frolicking around in a garden still. I don't know what would have happened. But anyway, that's my take on Adam and Eve. They were punked, and I hope that you're not being punked. So thanks for joining me. I will see you next week.